Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, whatever time zone you happen to be in. I greet you fondly. I'm Father Presutti, Zach Presutti. I'm a Jesuit of the East Coast province of the Society of Jesus, and I have the privilege of being able to be the founder of Thrive for Life Prison Project, where we're transforming lives both behind and beyond the U.S. prison walls through our retreat programming that's rooted in Ignatian spirituality, the spirituality of the Jesuits, the religious order that I'm a part of. And then just last year, we opened a house of studies in New York City for people who are coming out, our returning brothers and sisters coming out of prison, continuing their college education, living at Ignacio House, named after the namesake of St. Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits. I'm very grateful for you all for being here today, and I'm grateful for the Catholic Prison Ministry Coalition for hosting this important conversation with two guests that we have today who have spent a lot of time and dedicated a lot of their lives to accompanying our brothers and sisters behind the walls. So without further ado, allow me to please introduce to you Mr. Peter Courtwright and Diana Reeves, a husband and wife team who co-founded the Attenborough Immersion Reentry Program after the Attenborough St. Vincent de Paul Society Voice of the Poor Committee identified reentry as one of their regional priorities. Diana worked for 45 years as an educator at both the elementary and post-secondary levels, specialized in meeting the individual needs of her students. And Peter, a city and regional planner by training, brings his experience in government, banking, advocacy, and not-for-profit management to the partnerships. They live in Mansfield, Massachusetts. So without any further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Peter and Diana, who will offer us a presentation on their good work as they accompany our brothers and sisters behind the walls in their work in Massachusetts. Welcome, everyone. And the only little comment I would give is that if you have questions, comments, which are really important to generate our discussion after their presentation, I would ask you to write them in the chat box, which is right at the bottom of your screen. It says chat with a little conversation bubble. Just insert your questions, your comments right in there. And then after Peter and Diana's presentation, we'll be entertaining some of those for our conversation. So without further ado, Peter and Diana, welcome, and thank you to the Catholic Prison Ministry Coalition for hosting this.
Thank you, Father Zach, and welcome everybody. Good day or good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. We are in our office at 95 Pine Street in Attleboro, Massachusetts, just about 35 miles south of Boston and 15 or 20 miles north of Providence, Rhode Island. And for the first time all month, it's sunny and bright outside instead of raining. And I hope that the weather is cooperating in your part of the world, that you're not floating away someplace. I'm going to share our screen and we will get started. There we go. Let's see. This is working. There we go. So let's begin with a prayer as we do as Vincentians. And I will say it, you can say it along or read it along with us if you like. It's a pretty simple prayer. Dear Lord, we offer you this day all we will think or do or say. Keep us safe, keep us strong. Help us to know right from wrong. Grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Father Zach has already spilled the beans. Diana and I are a married couple, and we say this prayer to each other, to God, every morning before we get out of bed, and we think it helps. And we say it also with our returning citizens. It's a useful prayer, even though it's very, very simple, and I guess that's one of the beauties of prayer, right? Anything that you say is worthwhile.
We have put this program together today for ourselves and for you on the slides to keep us organized. We're addressing the questions that we primarily get from people interested in trying to replicate an immersion reentry program somewhere else in the United States. So very simply, we'll be talking about who we are, what we do, how we got started, what's working well for us, and what things continue to be a challenge for us.
The Vincentian motto or mission statement is, we are a network of friends called to holiness by walking with formerly incarcerated people and their family. That's the Immersion mission statement. We are members of the District Council of Attleboro in the Diocese of Fall River. There are three other district councils in the diocesan group, Cape Cod and the islands, New Bedford and Fall River, Taunton and Attleboro. There are 7 parishes remaining in our district, and so 7 conferences. We've decided 6 years ago that returning citizens were an important part of the population we serve, and in fact, we believe an important part of the population of every community in America, and so we decided to focus on that. We are all volunteers in our district. When we first found ourselves explaining the program that we are building to the Attleboro Rotary Club, we wanted to give them some context as to why working with returning citizens was important. First of all, there are a lot of people that are locked up in America at different levels. Ours have the biggest level that we deal with is the Bristol County House of Correction. But almost all of these people, 99.5%, are coming back to the community at one point or another. They need help. They've been locked away. They have no jobs, no income, no roof over their head. They've often lost the family connections that they had before incarceration. So we are obviously serving them as our first priority. But the community also suffers from incarceration in that when people come back to them, which they inevitably will as neighbors, they need jobs, they need to be productively employed, and they need housing. And if they don't get those services, they're going to be a burden on society. So we told the Rotarians that, among other things, our ultimate aim is to save taxpayer money. We help social service networks connect the dots. We help refer people to them, because once you're out of incarceration, you're on your own. There's nobody really looking after you. And we've taken on that burden. We help the justice system, who hopes and prays that they don't have to keep seeing the same people in front of them, in front of the court, in front of the jail officers. So if we can help them stay out of jail and lead productive lives, we're doing a good thing. And obviously we are helping our fellow Vincentians and others seeking volunteer opportunities and ways to serve the Lord by showing them how it can be done. And our honest belief is that every community in America ought to have a community-based reentry program to help returning citizens reintegrate.
So what do we do? What you see on the screen here are the 8 foundational components of any immersion program. Sites across the United States are implementing these programs, choosing and deciding which of these 8 components they're able to support based on their local situation. We provide support for the journey home and resources to assist in transition back to the community from incarceration. We could spend hours discussing each of these components, but I'm going to try to do a quick run through. For the mentoring that we provide, very often our first and lingering role is that of a listening ear. We go into the prisons, we work with the people once they come out. So we mentor them. Some of the people we've been working with, we are mentoring into the 5th year of knowing them. We work with them both pre-release and post-release, oftentimes just providing somebody to talk with them on the phone to try to work through a problem or get them something that they don't know how to connect with. Inside the prisons, we do the 72-hour transitional planning. This is something that we've been doing since we began, and we are using the Getting Ahead While Getting Out program, which enables people to make a plan in prison. You've all heard, I'm sure, that the first 72 hours out are critical. So the 72-hour transitional plan assists them in identifying goals, trying to formulate their future story, and at the same time, we provide food, bus passes, oftentimes personal care items, and we've taken clothing down to the prison because in our area, if you are arrested in summer, but you get out in winter, you're still wearing your flip-flops and shorts. So that's something we try to work with.
Housing and employment is critical. If you don't have a roof over your head, at least in this part of the world, for most of the year, you're in trouble. And you can't really find and keep a job if you don't have housing, a roof over your head, vice versa. You can't, those come together as employment, as necessities. So we do not operate any housing or own any housing, but we help people find the available housing that's there. And more importantly, we help them pay for that. Employment and education kind of go together in our world. Diana will explain a little bit of that.
I talked about the education that we provide inside the prison with the goggle classes. We've had we've had 6 classes, 90 people graduate from that program. And we've just begun a women's empowerment class through Immersion funding. And we are dealing with women coming out of our state prison, particularly around issues of overcoming trauma and identifying ways that you can move beyond defining yourself by your bad decisions. Community partnerships are a vital component of any reentry program in that we can't provide everything that people need, but we can provide a link to the services that they do need. And we've been very fortunate in our neighborhood to have partnerships with critically important services and agencies. Advocacy is something that we all work to accomplish. And I know there are actually 2 kinds of advocacy that we do. I'm going to talk about the overarching big picture advocacy. We began this program as a result of the Voice of the Poor, which I'll talk about in a few more minutes, but we try to keep an eye on the legislation that's pending at our state, local, and federal levels, the legislation that impacts people coming both into prison and out of prison. So we keep track and keep in touch with our legislative delegations. A few years back, we were very committed to criminal justice reform bill that we worked hard to back. So there's that kind of advocacy, and Peter will describe another kind.
Yeah, in addition to advocacy of public policy positions and legislative priorities, another thing I find us doing frequently is advocating on behalf of a returning citizen with the bureaucracy that they're seeking to work with. Can we actually get a live hearings officer to talk to a returning citizen who's had a little bit of a falling out with their driving record and has had their license suspended? Can we advocate to find help with a landlord group who's not inclined necessarily to rent to this population? So there's lots of different kinds of advocacy. And finally, our hope is that as a volunteer-driven initiative, we can educate and incent and motivate and inspire other people in our parishes, in our Vincentian community, in the community at large, other Christians, other people of all walks of life, to step forward and help us out and to get the fire in their belly to to serve the Lord in this way. It's a very exciting adventure.
I guess I would just like to say that we found that we speak to various groups, we try to publish articles. The more that people can understand the life circumstances of what brought a person into a prison or what their life is like upon return, the more likely it is that they're willing to rent to them or offer them a job or give them a chance to get a toehold in the community.
Thank you. So how did we get started? Diana was the voice of the Poor Committee for a number of years, and that is a group within St. Vincent de Paul that is their advocacy arm. And as we sort of go through a couple of focal areas every year, payday lending was a focal area, homeless youth was a focal area, and we came to incarceration and reentry, and decided it was so important that we could actually, and that nobody else was working on this in our region, we could do something about it. We built on the Vincentian Reentry Organizing Project, which is what VROP is. It was an earlier Vincentian project 6, 8, 10, 15 years ago. And there was, it created an awareness in our area, and so we built on top of that. We started by sitting down with the sheriff and asking him how we could help. And they said, well, come to our monthly reentry roundtables, which we did for many months. We realized that programming inside the House of Correction could start with getting ahead in a just getting by world. No, getting ahead
While getting out.
While getting out. I typed the wrong title in there. I don't know why I did that, because we've taught that class as well. But it's a course inside the jail that was 2 months, a couple times a week, we'd work with the inmates on an evening and talk to them about why they're in jail, how they could change their behaviors and their thinking, why they were good people, and could explain that to the outside world when they got out. And I'll let Diana continue on this list.
While we were doing that, I applied for a planning grant from St. Vincent de Paul National in the name of our district, and was able to get funding to do a needs assessment and to visit some other reentry programs in nearby localities, as well as just actually contacting those far away through the internet. We began to formulate a plan that would enable us to provide services for returning inmates. At the same time, we were blessed by being able to participate in what's called a self-sufficiency coalition. Some of you may know Irene Frechette or have heard of her. She is the vice president for our region from St. Vincent de Paul. And years ago, she organized all of the social service providers in our abutting towns to what's become known as the Self-Sufficiency Coalition. So we started attending their once monthly meetings, and we were able to find out what exists and what didn't exist. We went there with the eyes of being a returning person. How could we find help in the community, and where was there no help to be found? So we worked with that team, and we began to also work with their problem-oriented police team in the Attleboro, in the city of Attleboro. And it was important to get their input. We have since gone around and worked with other police communities in our abutting towns. And at the end of that, we were able, in working with the mayor of Attleboro, to have a donated office space in the old school where we presently still are. But we got a year worth of donated rent, which helped us get established.
With whom do we work? Anybody and everybody. The National Council of St. Vincent de Paul, obviously, and we're so thankful to be part of the new Immersion program. With us today is Heather Fullerton, who's the newly hired, still getting her feet wet, National Co-Director of Poverty Programs and the Director of the Immersion Reentry Program. And there are 4 or 5 other sites around the country who we regularly collaborate with in Florida and Iowa. Kelsey Brueggemann is here from the Des Moines partner, Wisconsin, Idaho, and there are other Vincentians around the country who are hopefully eager to start their own immersion reentry programs at some point. And we're looking at this partly as a run through of our continual story about how to help them do that. But obviously, we work closely with the government, the justice system. We've already talked about our legislative backers, if you will, but we know the probation officers, the police, the judges, the district attorney, the sheriff, the people who work at the jail. And we're a part of their team now. And our part of the team is arguing, as I do up here, we need to punish people less and we need to invest more in productive lives. That's sort of my personal motto. It's not necessarily the motto of any of our official sponsors, but we need to, I would never say defund the jails, but
you will.
But I will say it anyway. It's just not working. They do not fix people. We need to get off of that. But now I'll stop that. That's my personal passion. We work with education providers. Pave Your Path is an entrepreneurial partner next to it, the Attleboro Literacy Center, the community colleges. We work with a whole host of community and faith-based organizations, including the Catholic Social Services here in the Fall River Diocese, the Attleboro Interfaith Collaborative, community colleges. We have a rides program that through Uber that for a small investment on the part of about a dozen investors, organizations provides Uber rides for people who cannot get rides on the existing public transportation network. And of course, we work with a lot of people who manage housing. Because one of the biggest activities that we do here in Attleboro is provide funding, limited funding, for folks to getting out of jail to get a roof over their heads, oftentimes in a sober house environment, which is not perfect, but we simply do not have enough affordable housing in our area. So that's what we have to work with right now.
One of our most, I don't want to forget this, but one of our most beneficial community partnerships is with the YMCA. And we have come to understand actually how important exercise and physical health is to regaining your mental health. And we are delighted to partner with the Y, who have been providing an opportunity for people coming back to the community to have a two-week to four-week experience at the Y, and also giving them a sliding scale of membership that we're sometimes able to assist with to get them literally back on their feet. So a big question that we often get is, how are we funded? And we are primarily funded by donations from individuals sitting in the pews in the Catholic churches in our district. Our district office, our district council of the Attleboro district contributes funds, as well as the individual conferences. We have been fortunate over the years to obtain both contributions and grants from agencies such as banks, the Rotary Club, different local charitable efforts, the United Way. Peter is going to explain about the district attorney's forfeiture fund. And this we're actually kind of excited to share, because we're thinking that probably district attorneys in other areas have similar funds which could be put to reentry use.
District attorneys are very important, and they're in every community in the nation. Most of them have a pot of money that they use for small community expenditures, use it in different ways. We were lucky enough to develop a relationship with our district attorney. We asked him for just a couple of $1,000s, and he gave us a lot more. And
But what's important, excuse me for interrupting, but it's money that was taken from people who were drug involved. And so they had to forfeit their money. So it's kind of a good thing that they could eventually get helped by the money.
We're reinvesting those wages of sin, I guess, back in a different way. And we hope we're investing it well. We have a small line item in the state budget, which we hope to grow in the future. Again, I'm going to keep telling our legislative delegation that I'm asking them, is the incarceration system truly working the way we want it to work? Are there other ways that we can spend our taxpayer dollars on helping human beings reach their full potential? Of course, we're happy to have grants from our national St. Vincent de Paul. During COVID, we've been able to get community development block grants from our community development office. And I think you've all read about new COVID initiatives at the federal level, which are literally dumping billions of dollars in each state in our nation. That money is trickling down to cities and towns, to county offices. Go ask your mayor, go ask your county commission if you can have some of that money to do rehabilitation work in reentry, whether it's spiritually oriented or practically oriented. There's almost more money than people know what to do with these days, and we might as well use some of it for good purposes. All of our funds are used for direct service or miscellaneous office expense, telephones. We have no money going to administration. This is not necessarily a sustainable model, but this is where we are right now. Challenges, I could also call this frustrations, but I'm going to let Diana take this one.
Thank you. What fun. The challenges that we face, I think probably Peter alluded to, in that we are volunteer run. And so there's a continual stress, a continual recruiting effort to find volunteers who are willing to give it the time, talent, and treasure required. We can use people to assist us in our office work. We can also, we encourage people simply to sign up to be a mentor to someone who gets out, calling them on the phone once a week and finding out how they might be able to help. We've alluded to the lack of affordable housing. It's impossible to find an apartment, a standalone apartment in our area for probably less than $900. And it's extremely difficult. And finding housing for sex offenders is almost impossible. I'm sure many of you share that challenge. And while we have been able to identify one location, we continue to struggle with that. We've mentioned getting employment. Part of the difficulty is not only we do have a list of employers who are felon friendly, who say they're willing to assist with our folks, but we also have to overcome the mental hurdle that many of the people coming out of our prisons have lost the will to work, and they are not in any shape yet to work. Many of them are still addicted. Many of them have mental health issues that make it difficult for them to rally enough to seek employment on their own. So that's why we've actually begun to offer a big emphasis on the education coming out of prison to try to get yourself ready for that job interview. Managing client data and measuring outcomes. I think this is a challenge that people don't even realize until they get into it. If you need to seek funding, you're going to need to provide data. And so keeping track of how many people you have served, how you have served them, and what kinds of services they received, and being able to document growth over time. It's not impossible to do that, but it takes consistent data entry. It takes managing the entry to provide reports on a timely basis. And it takes somebody who can look at that data and then turn it around into a grant application. So it's time consuming and it's challenging. Maintaining communication with those whom we are working. Many of them don't have phones, and we're not in a position to buy everyone a phone. And frequently we get them housed and we perhaps get them on the path to a job interview, and we don't hear any more from them until they come back 2 months later, and they might have bounced back into prison for doing some silly violation of probation. So those are some of the challenges we faced. Of course, we faced the very real problem during COVID, and we're still operating under that problem, which is a lack of access to the jails and prisons. Our systems here in Massachusetts do not have internet, so we've not been able to do Zoom meetings or any of the training or meetings that we had done previously on pre-release returnees. And we still have not been able to get back in. They're not even allowing visitors yet.
Thank you. So those are just some of the challenges and frustrations, but we've also had some successes. We're very happy. This is the right listing for getting ahead while getting out. An AHA process program curriculum that we've done 5 or 6 times, graduating 90 inmates in the Bristol County House of Correction. One of the most exciting parts of this is that at the end of the 2-month process, there's the workbook that Diana that she uses. Everybody in the class gets a workbook. It's an interesting curriculum. We'd be happy to answer questions about it. That'll have to be a different time. But we have a graduation ceremony inside the House of Correction that we are able to involve. Unfortunately, we're not able to involve family members, but we involve local leaders, legislators. We've had judges. We've had the district attorney come and speak to some of. We've had Vincentians. We've had the district attorney come and speak to people who they have put in behind the bars, and that's a very emotional-filled moment. We've had the sheriff's staff take photographs and help write articles, which is some of the few bits of publicity that we've gotten. We're not very good at publicity, but that's something that we're working on for the future. Diana mentioned women's empowerment classes. We've had a legislative forum that enables us to educate the community at large about what the Society of St. Vincent de Paul does and about many of the community issues: housing, transportation, wages, other kinds of things that affect not only our returning citizens, but the community in poverty at large. I'll ask Diana to mention something about Serveware, which is our client database program, essential these days to try and keep track of everything that you're trying to do.
Serveware is, if some of you may already be using it, it's a data collection program specifically designed for Vincentian use by Vincentians. So it collects the data that is required for your yearly report. It goes into national. It took me a good long time to get a hold of it, but we're very fortunate in that the district president, Mary Dwyer, is very capable with it and repeatedly helps me overcome my errors. It's a tremendously easy program to obtain data from, and it helps us track each of the individuals that we serve, and it yields with the click of the key the information that you are required to use in any kind of a grant application for funding. I'm going to let Peter take on the phone system improvement, not all the details, but the high points. It sounds silly, but it made a big difference.
Particularly during COVID, but even before, we were using our cell phones to communicate with our client base. This becomes a nightmare after a while. Despite what Diana said earlier, almost every inmate gets out of jail and the first thing they do is get a cell phone. It's the only way they can survive. And we're talking mostly young people in their 20s and 30s is our population. We're not dealing with long-term federal inmates or state inmates as much. We're dealing with county jail inmates who are in their 20s and 30s. They live and die with their cell phones. They would call us and text us at all time of the day or night, and it was driving us literally crazy. So we went to Comcast Business, which supplies our office landline and supplies our office internet. And we said, do you have a system that can help us? And they did. And now we are having everybody call a special number that is not our cell phone. It's our general district number. And they choose number 1 on the voicemail system, which allows them to leave a voice message for the reentry staff. And they do not see our personal cell phone numbers. And we see not only the voice message, but we get an email. Each of us gets an email with a voice transcription of that message and that phone number that we can look at and decide how to dispatch to one of our volunteer case managers, if you will. And that is a huge improvement because we're not dealing with the tyranny of the phone call in the middle of the grocery store, or the tyranny of the phone call at a family gathering, or on vacation while you're climbing out of the shower in the Grand Teton National Park, the tyranny of the phone call. And it sounds really silly, but for us, it's been a huge improvement.
It allows you to make the phone call back to the person who called while masking your own phone number. That's a big plus.
And I think this is just the start of the way we can begin learning how to use technology
a big improvement for us boomers, Okay,
for us
we can
boomers.
now use the telephone successfully.
I think, we could spend time with these other things. We've already talked about the volunteer staff. We couldn't do our work without them. And we're excited when we get a new one on board. Communicating with Vincentians and community partners has been working well with reports, with websites. We're learning how to put things on websites. I will say that one of the things we are not very good at is all the social media platforms. We just have not had the time or frankly the inclination.
I'll speak up, or the talent. to go on Twitter. Maybe you can understand that, but Twitter, I don't even go on Twitter. Stop.
That's it. That's where we think we're a vital link between people getting out of jail and the community. We're continuing to learn about that every day of our lives. We've told you about as much as we need to. Now it's time to answer your questions. So I'm gonna flip to the next slide, which is our contact information. I understand that this whole presentation will be provided to you as a PDF following the presentation a week or so down the road, but we're happy to answer your questions. I guess I will stop sharing, they told me, and we can all see each other. Thank you for your time. We're happy to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Peter and Diana. Thank you so much for all the good work that you do through your Vincentian family, but also for the good people of Edinburgh. It's a wonderful ministry, a wonderful activation of the corporal works of mercy that Jesus invites us into. So we have some time here to entertain some questions for Peter and Diana. Again, I think the way to proceed best with this would be that if you do have a question, if you could just type it in the chat box, which is at the bottom of the screen, and then I'll zip through the questions and offer them to Peter and Diana, and I think it can help with the flow of the communication. So let's start with our first question that Brian Cahill asks of Peter and Diana, and what areas do the education classes cover? That I'm presuming it's the education classes that that he's referring to, that you offer behind the walls through this curriculum. Maybe you might want to say a little bit more about that curriculum and the education that it offers.
Okay, the program is called Getting Ahead While Getting Out, and it's published by AHA, A-H-A, with an exclamation point, process. And the issues that are covered go from envisioning your life upon release. There's a theory of change that's dealt with. There is an exploration of the causes of poverty and discussion of the hidden rules of economic class. A lot of the work inside the prison goes to identifying resources in the town that you will be returning to. Where can you find assistance with employment? Where might you find someone to assist you with your child support concerns? How might you get low-cost furniture? So there's quite a bit of exploration that goes on each person's part about looking at the community to which they will return. There is quite a bit on assessing your strengths and your weaknesses as an individual, looking at what kinds of activities present a threat to you. There's quite a bit of emphasis on the kinds of resources that you might or might not have as a person. For example, you assess your financial resources, your emotional resources, your mental health. There's an opportunity to look at how language impacts how others see you. You look at your spiritual resources, your social capital. That's a big one. How can you begin to grow your social capital as you get out? There's quite a bit of conversation about motivation and persistence and how important it is to find a role model. So those are the issues that are incorporated into that curriculum. Does that help?
Thank you so much, Diana. Yeah, that's very helpful, and thanks for the explanation. A bit of an explanation regarding that curriculum. I too am familiar with it. For those who are not, it's getting ahead while getting out a program. And as Diana just showed you the cover, in a simple Google search will lend some more information regarding it. Our next question comes from Frank Cody. You hit a little bit on this. It's a question with regards to the population that's being served. It says that he says you work in jails and prisons and with returning citizens from both. Can you tell us a little bit about the difference in achieving success with each of the two groups, particular stresses of one over the other? Houses of correction you speak about, county, state. I know you mentioned a little earlier that you're predominantly working with a county correctional facility. So these are not state facilities where people are serving long sentences. These are not federal facilities where people are. Now, this population, so jail and county facilities, they really offer a very unique reentry experience. It's very much unlike, which have another challenge is people who have been locked up for decades. People who are coming out of the jail. This is a very unique population that you did hit on in your anecdotes. The recidivism is very much prevalent in this population. So maybe hitting on Frank Cody's question, would you talk a little bit about the stresses that this offers?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. The longer term criminal who's been sentenced to 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years in a state or federal facility, number one, was more mature going in than many of the people that we see, has experienced a much higher level of programming while incarcerated in a state facility or a federal facility than in a county facility, which is virtually no program, at least in Massachusetts. Every state is different. Connecticut, the state government controls all of the jails from short-term incarceration to the state facilities. In Massachusetts, you've got 14 different county sheriffs running 14 different county jails, all with slightly different philosophies and resource levels and attitudes. And we have one of the most challenging right here in Massachusetts in Bristol County with Sheriff Thomas Hodgson, who's we work with closely, but the resource levels are tough. It's a challenge. It's a big difference than the other jails.
Yeah.
As far as the the returnees, many of them have grown up in households that are affected by poverty or infected by incarceration themselves. Mother and dad aren't together. Mother or dad may be dead from an overdose. They have drug issues that exist when they went into jail. They exist a year and a half or 2 years later. They don't get treatment in jail. This sheriff and some of these county jails don't provide the kinds of medical care or drugs that others do to help people get off of opioid addiction. So they're very much impacted, and they come back out on the street, which I guess is a good place for them. The jails are basically places to warehouse a problem population for a short period of time. We are not equipped to deal with them when they come out, but we're doing the best we can and trying to raise that issue to the state and local authorities.
I would say of the few people, and we're getting more women now coming out of the Framingham State Prison. These are long-term people who are coming out with maybe 20 plus years of having been inside. They are much more committed, motivated, and they kind of have their story down. They know what they want to do, and they are progressing step by step through doing that. The crowd that we normally deal with, the frustration is that they are still immature enough that they make a silly, as we talked about before, they do some silly violation of probation and they're back in for another month or so. And that's one of the big stresses.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I cannot highlight enough or stress enough a comment that you've made several times with regards to following up on these questions. This whole notion of poverty, it's absolutely crucial. I mean, it's warehousing a poor population, and that's not unique in Massachusetts. That's across the country. The next question comes from Chaplain Terry. How is your program, especially the 72-hour transitional planning, accomplished by not having volunteers in the correctional facilities due to COVID? So this is a logistical question from Chaplain Terry.
Well, it's a very good question. I think to be quite honest with you, the biggest impact is doing it before they get out. But now that we can't do it before they get out, literally, we have not been able to deputize the jail staff to go through this exercise. I wish we could. I wish we did have internet access. So we have to, as soon as they get out, they come to see us. So if they are able to find us, and we go through an intake process with them that essentially ask them to think about these questions on the outside as they are experiencing not having thought about them. And it's where are you going to live? Where are you going to, what are your needs? Do you need a pair of underwear? Do you need a pair of socks? You got a closet full of that stuff. Do you have a phone that works? Do you have a place to, how is your family relationship? Where's your mother and father and your kids, your ex? Can you talk to them? Will they help you out? I mean, very fundamental questions. We have a 5 or 6 page form, which we call the transitional planning kind of answer form that we'd be happy to share with any of you that kind of shows you what we think our form looks like. Who's your probation officer? Do you know when your next court date is? Do you have a driver's license? Do you owe child support? Those very fundamental questions that most of these young people who have been in and out of jail for most of their adult life, and they're in their 20s, they know the answers to these things, but they don't always have healthy responses to those questions. So the trick is to have them think about how it has worked before or how it hasn't worked before and how they're going to do it differently this time so that they're not caught in the tyranny of the moment and make the same bad decision that they made that got them back inside last time.
One of the things that's kind of useful in that regard is that the Immersion program provides a 10 category snapshot, if you will. One of the last things we do with people when they show up at our office is to assess, they assess themselves. as to how they are doing in 10 categories: housing, clothing, housing, food, employment, mental health, physical health, transportation, and they assess themselves on a Likert scale, 1 to 5. Where are you? Are you in terrible situation, critical situation, or are you self-empowered? So they assess themselves so that when they first arrive, we have a quantifiable picture, if you will, of where they stood when they first arrived. As we contact them later, 3 months down the road, we do that again. We walk them through that self-assessment, and it helps them see where some growth might have occurred, and we help them see what might be their next critical category to focus on. If you don't have employment yet, transportation may be what's holding you back. So then you need to focus. We say, okay, in the next 3 months, let's work. What do you think we need to work on? Okay, it looks like it's transportation. Let's see what we can do in the next 3 months to get you on a bus line to a job, or in some way get a clunker of a car. Is there a relative that can help you? So it's a sort of a focused way of guiding the returning citizen through a self-selection process of growth.
Thank you very much. We only have a few more minutes left, so we have a few more questions that we'd like to get through. How many persons do you work with on a monthly, a daily basis, in person or over the phone? I'm sure, yeah.
We have been averaging between 22 and 25 a month. Now, I would say of that amount, half is new people and half are people that we've already worked with coming back for additional help.
Thank you. And who on your team teaches the Women's Empowerment Program?
I help to facilitate it, but we are very fortunate that we are housed literally the next office to ours is the Pave Your Path program, which is a life coaching program. And the director of that program and her social worker help to facilitate. So there's 3 of us facilitating that program.
Thank you. And how many volunteers do you have working in the context of all your programs with the Immersion Project in St. Vincent de Paul?
I think at the prior to COVID,
Probably about
15.
15.
Obviously, during COVID, far fewer than that. Although we've been back in our office every week since a year ago, since last July, and we're starting to get some of those 15 who haven't been as active over the last year coming back at this point in the game. So
9 of them were facilitators for getting ahead while getting out.
Mm-hmm.
We're also very fortunate that we have a loyal third member of our team who is a retired probation officer. Paul Hodge is here all the time as our third member of the intake office, and we've just recently gotten a couple more people to come back to help with data entry.
Thank you. And back to the classes, and maybe we can, rewind to pre-COVID. How many were in the class, and how often did you have the class, and what did that look like within the prison context?
The class, the most the prison would allow us to take was 15. So we had 15 men. We had applicants. We would go down and select the men. Last time they were selected from a pool of 47 people who wanted to be in it. The class ran twice a week in the evening. In the getting ahead while getting out text, it suggests a way to run it that the prison would not allow us to do. We can't have food in the middle of the session. So I think we would gather at 6 o'clock.
it ran from 6 to 8 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays,
So
which is the only free slot that the jail gave us to run, because they have all kinds of other classes during other parts of
Sure.
And so we ran it for 2 months. And I think it works out to about 40 classroom hours. And the way that we started it, Peter and I had already had been facilitators for Getting Ahead in the Just Getting By world. And Paul joined us as kind of an observer and to get on board before he got trained, then he got trained. So we had like 2 people who had done it before and 1 newbie. So each time we ran it with 3 facilitators so that we could break the 15 down into 3 groups of 5 for small group work. And one of the 3 facilitators would be new to being a facilitator. But that person then would be one of the experienced facilitators the next time it ran.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And it looks like we're just about out of time. And I know Jared wants to have a final word. Peter, Diana, thank you so much for your work. Thank you for your generosity. Thank you to all the wonderful people, the St. Vincent de Paul Conference and District in Edinburgh. And I think you deserve more than a round of applause, but maybe we could offer a round of applause to you and for all your great work. And perhaps what we could do before we close, today is the feast of St. Mary Magdalene. It's a feast in the church, the apostle to the apostles. So maybe we can close with a little prayer through the intercession of St. Mary of Magdala. Loving God, we thank you for the gift of life. Today, we thank you for the gift of Peter and Diana and the entire conference of the St. Vincent de Paul in Edinburgh. We thank you for their hearts and hands and voices and accompanying our brothers and sisters behind the walls and offering that beautiful and necessary continuity of care as they re-enter back into our community. Bless them, protect them from anything that can harm them, and they be always rooted and grounded in your love and proclaiming and announcing the resurrection that Christ has to offer as so boldly exemplified in St. Mary of Magdala. We ask this all in your good and holy name. Amen. The Lord be with all of you. May Almighty God bless you, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Thank you again.
Great. Thank you, Father Zach, for that closing prayer. And thank you, Peter and Diana. I just wanted to throw out a few commercials here before we kick you all off and set you free. Next month, we will not be having any town halls, no diocesan town hall, no reentry town halls. That's your vacation month. Go out and walk outside or treat yourself in some way. But we will be having our monthly webinar. Our monthly webinar is going to be the legal challenges facing immigrant detainees. So Jorge Barron from the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project will be with us to discuss some of those legal challenges and how we as ministers can walk with those individuals as they are detained, just so we can have a little more of a understanding and an empathetic ear of what they may be going through. I'll put that registration link in the chat. And from then, I think that's all we've got going on right now, coming up here in August. That registration and the flyer can be found on our website, which I just put in the chat feature there. So thank you all. Thank you, Father Zach. Thank you, Peter and Diana. And we'll see you all next time.